Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Bronfman Fellowship information call, and I'm gonna share with you some just housekeeping as we get started. I'm Becky Vorwinda. I'm the Executive Director of the Fellowship. I'm also an alumna. I went on the program in 1997. We ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking during this call. There will be ample time for Q&A towards the second half of the call, and so there will be opportunities to speak. You can also use the chat feature. You'll see that one of our participants, Panina, who's an alumna, is helping us this evening with Zoom. So if you run into any kind of technical challenges, or if you'd like to send a question while the presentation is going on, you're welcome to do that by chatting to Panina, or when the Q&A starts, you can also put in questions into the chat at that point. This call is being recorded, and so just please be aware of that as well. And again, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, I'm Becky. I am here this evening in Brooklyn, New York, so a little bit later than probably many of you who I assume are on the West Coast, and really glad that we could do a call like this because the fellowship really focuses on recruitment across a wide range of geographies. And I am aware that in the Bay Area right now, the air quality is not very good at the moment, and just wanted to let all of you know that we're thinking of you if you are in that part of the country. And I wanted to introduce Jake Marmer, our Education and Programming Director.
Hi folks, I'm Jake Marmer. I'm Education and Programming Director in my second year with Bronfman, and I live on the West Coast in the Bay Area, and look forward to meeting you and chatting with you tonight.
Great. So first, I just want to give you a sense of how this evening is going to go. We will share with you some highlights about the program and an overview of what to expect as a fellow. You'll have the opportunity to hear directly from two recent fellows, from Molly Weiner and Daniel Shapiro, and you'll hear about their experience. We'll talk a little about our application process, some tips around the application, and also how we are taking into account some of the impacts that COVID has had for some of you as you're thinking about your application. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be a chance to ask questions to Jake, to myself, to Molly, and to Daniel, and hopefully everyone will get whatever information they are most looking for on a call like this evening. So, what is the Bronfman Fellowship? And who's a Bronfman Fellow? I want to start by actually sharing with you a line that stood out to me years and years ago in one of our brochures. And that line was that the conversations go well into the night. And that idea that being in a group with 25 other peers who love learning, who are excited and engaged in deep existential conversations, who have a wide range of backgrounds and identities, and who don't just leave the learning to the classroom, but really want to keep those conversations going and are motivated to think, to learn, to connect. That idea, for me personally, animated my desire to be a Bronfman Fellow, and really in so many ways keeps me so passionate about what this program is. That idea that this is a community of people to have these rich conversations with, and also to really enact what matters to you in the world through those relationships. I want to share with you a moment what we call our impact framework. We've thought a lot after 35 plus years of a fellowship with over 1,300 alumni. What kind of impact do Bronfmanim, what kind of impact do the individuals who are Bronfman Fellows have in the world? And we've thought about the ways that Bronfmanim are community builders and deep thinkers, moral voices, and cultural creators. And what that looks like might be a little bit different for each person in our cohort. There are some Bronfman Fellows who are deeply passionate about a specific issue or a specific talent or something that they are really engaged in on a deep level. There are others who are really working across multiple dimensions and reflect kind of a hybrid of some of these values and ideas. And that is what in part really makes for the richness of the diverse group of fellows that we have. And we hope that the learning that we do, which Jake is going to have a chance to talk to you about, the kind of experience that you'd have as a fellow, also helps foster and support fellows' ability to be community builders and deep thinkers and really contribute to the future. So I want to take a moment to talk about our commitment to inclusion. This fellowship is grounded in a belief in pluralism, in a belief that it's really valuable to be in community and in conversation across a wide range of differences. We accept applications from all those who self-identify as Jewish, and we expect that all fellows who are part of this program respect and value each individual and leave room for each individual to self-identify. And so in that sense, we want to just name the fact, and especially if you find that your part of your identity or part of your background is something that you believe you'd like to talk to a Bronfman alum who might share that background, we just want to let you know that we are welcoming and welcome inquiries around how the fellowship works very hard to make space for all voices at the table and to be in a Jewish conversation that is enriched by the distinctiveness of our group. And to give you a little sense, this slide, I won't go into each person, but I think, hopefully it gives you a sense of where do our Bronfman Fellows land? As I mentioned, this is a program that is 35 years in the making. We have alumni at this point who are in their early 50s, and we've really seen that our alumni are change makers and thinkers and contributors to culture in so many beautiful ways, both in the Jewish community and beyond. So I'm going to take one more moment to kind of give you an overview of our fellowship year, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jake to talk more about what happens during that magical fellowship year. And what I want to just express is that first and foremost, this really is a personal journey of learning, an existential opportunity to really delve deeply both into Jewishness and big ideas that animate you, but to do so in community, to do so in a very special and unique community of peers. And what we found makes for a fellowship year is a starting point of an immersive summer experience before 12th grade. And that summer experience involves learning with our faculty team, hearing from speakers, and again, being able to foster deep relationships. And we also have additional seminars and additional virtual that are part of what makes up the fellowship year. There are 2 seminars in 12th grade that happen domestically in the US. And there's also monthly virtual sessions both before the summer as well as afterwards that fellows participate in, as well as an opportunity to engage in what we call the Beyond Bronfman project, which is really a personal exploration of ideas and questions that resonate for you, and then applying that to something you can share with your home community and your home environment. So it's a very holistic experience. And as you'll hear later from both Daniel and Molly, there's different ways that that has played out. This past summer, we had a virtual experience as our immersive experience, and Daniel will tell you a bit about how that went as a result of not being able to come together in person because of COVID at that time. Molly went the summer prior and had a different journey and experience, but yet you're probably going to hear some real overlaps in what that experience meant, and we will get into some more of that soon. So before I hand it to Jake, I just wanted to mention how we're thinking about plans for 2021. And first and foremost, we are committed to having a cohort of North American fellows, and likewise a cohort of Israeli fellows, which is also, we have 2 concurrent programs every year. And we are committed to providing a rich and deep and transformative experience for the cohort of 2021. We hope that international travel would be possible, but we are also taking into account the importance of safety and health and exploring the possibility of a domestic experience or virtual programming if that were not safe to do. So we want to just let you know where we're at, and we'll happily answer some more questions on that as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake. Jake, I'll continue to be your slide person. So if you feel that I need to move on, let me know.
Sounds great. Thank you, Becky. Folks, so undoubtedly, one of the greatest assets of the fellowship is the group of educators that we have on staff. As you see on this slide, we have university professors, rabbis who are also university professors, and a mix of artists, folks who are really leaders, intellectual leaders in their fields. And they're also role models in their communities, and they become role models for our fellows and build relationships that last, long past the summer or a college recommendation or, a year, but really long-lasting, important, formative relationships. The educators you've seen on this list, these are from, this current year, but of course, next year, we'll have equally stellar collective of educators. And the reason why we get folks of this caliber, really, really incredible educators, is because the Bronfman community is a very unique place where learning for learning's sake occurs at its highest. And many of educators feel that this is why we've become educators in the first place. This sort of learning, this sort of vibe and environment that that Bronfman engenders. So what you're seeing also on the screen here are the names of the shiurim that these educators ran, and shiurim are kind of like deep dives into specific topics. So on a year where we're in person, just to kind of like envision folks sitting on a grass around an educator with a bunch of texts, and it's a very dynamic conversation and a real great exploration of, as Becky said, kind of key existential questions. Okay, next slide, please. And in addition to our fabulous educators, we also have a great deal of speakers, a really kind of amazing pool of speakers, some of whom, as you see on this slide, include actual alums of the fellowship. And of course, we engage with great contemporary thinkers, writers, activists, artists, all sorts of folks, and of course, conversations with them are meant to engender a great deal of discussion, discussion that gets processed together with faculty, that becomes a real source for deep discussions, whether you sit and linger long after lunch that you share, or you get on a heated phone call across the continent. Whichever mode we're in, that part remains the same. And of course, the silver lining of this past summer of being virtual was our ability to bring in anybody. And we had a fantastic range of folks. On the next slide, you'll see a list of a few questions, just some of them that we begin to grapple with. And the way that we approach or get to these questions is through a really rich range of texts. Some of these are classical, sacred Jewish texts, and some of them are more contemporary works of philosophy and poetry, really open texts that invite profound conversation and present a really, really broad range of things. So whether you're coming from a more traditional background or not, you are encountering something that's really new to you. Everybody encounters this range. On the next slide, you'll see photos of folks who led our art workshops, which was a new addition to the fellowship. We piloted it this year, and this too was a great silver lining of being virtual. We had art tracks for poetry, which I had the pleasure of teaching, visual art, theater, and music. And these were led by professional contemporary Jewish artists who are really, really making a difference, who are building Jewish culture now, in the now. So they really know what they're talking about. They're also professional educators. And it was a great pleasure to bring them and to have that addition to the fellowship. And of course, those of you on the call now who don't think of themselves as arts people, don't worry, because above all, art in our context is meant to bring communities together, for people to get to know each other better on a deeper level, to reach and express the thing that could not be expressed by means of art. Of course, nobody needs to have any kind of art practice to be able to participate. So you see a little bit of art that our fellows made. Of course, if you were on the open mic Slack channel, you would see a great deal more. It was really special to see all of the work that was created over the course of this past summer. In addition to the fellows, North American fellows, as Becky mentioned, we also have a cohort of Israeli fellows, and that encounter between the two communities is also a really important part of the learning that happens on the fellowship. Fellows find themselves profoundly surprised by differences and also similarities between the two groups, and building that connection and getting to know the other group is an important part of the fellowship experience. So at this point, I want to move forward and to introduce to you two fellows, Daniel, who's currently a fellow, and Molly, who was a fellow last year. They will tell you a little bit about their background and share some highlights of their experience and their stories. So Molly is going to go first. Molly, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Molly. As it says on this slide, I'm from San Mateo, California, so San Francisco Bay Area. I am currently on a gap year before attending Yale. Some things I'm doing this year include a journalism internship, some babysitting, some political volunteering, and I'm moving to Israel for a couple months in the spring to work on a farm. A bit about my Jewish background. I went to a Jewish middle school, but I'd gone to a public school before that. I went to an independent secular high school in San Francisco. So I definitely, coming into Bronfman, had like some Jewish experience, like considered myself fairly like Jewishly literate. And like I went to a Reform synagogue. So that's some Jewish context about me. Okay, a highlight, my Bronfman highlight story. I think it's funny how Becky opened talking about like conversations that go deep into the night, because that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. But I think I'll talk about my last night on Bronfman. So like after having like gone out to dinner with like our journal group leaders who were faculty members who led like small groups, we had this like Bait Cafe, which is like a talent show. So some fellows gave really like serious, you know, personal performances. They like read their poetry, they sang. Some fellows did like total satire sketches that were very funny. The faculty like did some stuff, like these very, you know, well-known tenured professors are like joining in and all the like silly stuff too. And then later into the night, it's like 2 a.m. and people are having a conversation about like, this is also totally like unrelated to any of our like recent shiurs. This is like just a totally, you know, organic conversation about like Jewish American identity in relation to Israel, and like what it means to be Jewish in America when there's this like Jewish state, and like, is that even, are you even part of like a diaspora anymore? And what does that mean? And this is like at 2 a.m. someone had like ordered kosher pizza. Like that's a very, I don't know, very Bronfman thing, being late at night, like talking about your own questions and such. And then, we're like laying on the lawn of our campus, like very late at night, like trying to, savor it all. And like the sprinklers go off and everyone's soaking wet. And like, it just, I think shows how, Bronfman is like this wonderful mix of just like crazy fun and like everyone really bonding and forming like such close, loving relationships, and also like very moving intellectualism. So that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. And now over to Daniel.
Yeah, cool. So, hello, everybody. I am Daniel Shapiro. I am a high school senior from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am a current 2020 cohort Bronfman Fellow. Let's see, a bit about me. God, I should be better at doing this. I'm in the middle of the college process. I take Japanese. That's definitely something that's interesting. I even got to go on an exchange program last year where I attended high school in Japan for a while. I'm a very avid hiker and mountain biker, and I'm also a pretty active guitarist. I make some of my own music, and yeah, I hope to do medicine. That's my career goal. Maybe provide some medicine to some low-income communities for more affordable price than the current economy allows. And let's see, a Bronfman memory. I had a virtual experience, so it definitely wasn't as like wild or just like random as Molly's experience was, I'm sure. But it's actually kind of a similar memory. It's funny because at some point we had this like, I guess Molly called it like the Bake Cafe. I don't think we really had a name for it. It was sort of like a talent show, like community building experience over Zoom. And it was kind of funny. Like at first I thought it wasn't going to work. Like I thought the people would be like too shy. Like I was too shy to like want to do something at first over Zoom. But then, just sort of, we started doing it. Everyone started like sharing their art. People started singing. People started like telling jokes, doing comedy, reading poetry. And it was just such like a beautiful experience because everyone was just being so like loving and caring towards each other. We were all like hyping each other up. And it was just such a great like community building experience. And it was crazy because it was like over the internet. And, like it was with people that you'd never met before in person. And I think that just sort of shows the like how powerful the connections you make in Bronfman are and how strong the bond is between all of the fellows. Because even though we'd never seen each other in person, we were able to have such a strong connection and have such a meaningful moment together. So yeah, it's a pretty good time.
Thank you guys so much for giving us a little window into your experiences, and the spontaneity that kind of comes across in both your stories really reflects what it means to be in community. And that's such a big part of what the Bronfman experience is about. Something that maybe I want to add in that we didn't get into as deeply in the opening of this call is really to emphasize some of the ways that religious pluralism plays out on the fellowship. We have each year a cohort that includes people who self-identify as Orthodox and keep Shabbat in traditional ways, perhaps have only been to environments with other Jewish students. We have students who perhaps come from dual faith families, or individuals who are defined as proudly culturally Jewish or from Russian speaking backgrounds. There's so many different identities that come into the mix. And one of the things that I think is really special and unique about the fellowship that, again, we're happy to talk more about and answer some specific questions when we get into the Q&A very shortly. But when Jake, for example, was talking about the tech study and the learning that we do, it is a meeting of minds that happens. Whether or not a fellow has what they might define as a certain amount of Jewish background or literacy, the way that our learning takes place that's irrelevant. What's relevant is bringing your mind and your heart and your story to these texts and going very deep, both intellectually and personally, into the learning together, and really leveling that playing field in a sense. What we believe is that it may not be possible for Jewish individuals to find a way to agree on exactly how they want to pray together, or how they, for example, want to maybe host each other in one another's homes from a kashrut, from a kosher standpoint, but that Jews can meet across text together and can also really meet across the friendships that develop. So the fellowship in community includes having a Shabbat experience, which is both very respectful and fully capable of supporting fellows who come from observant backgrounds, while at the same time allows options and choice for fellows who are not traditionally observant of the Sabbath, or maybe have never had the chance to experience a Shabbat or a traditional Shabbat. So there's a wide range of ways that Jewish life plays out in the group, but we really work to support everyone coming at that together. And again, we'll get a chance to respond to some more of those questions, but I'm going to do my last two slides before we move into the Q&A. So if you've got some questions, you're welcome to either start putting those into the chat. Just don't press send, because then I won't be able to stay focused. Thank you. Or you'll also be welcomed to just put up your hand using in the participant button. You'll be able to find the raise hand function if you'd like to have us call on you. So the last two slides that I want to get into is a little about our application process and about what to expect from that. Our applications are due December 3rd. The application is live on our website, bronfman.org, and so we certainly encourage you to start the process now, because it does have multiple dimensions to it, including needing to provide both a transcript from your school as well as 2 letters of recommendation, and certainly want to encourage you to ask those adults that need to get those things done for you to give them enough time to do that. We have a very rigorous review process. All applications are reviewed by multiple readers, and we do narrow down our pool of candidates to a group of semifinalists. This year they will be notified in mid-January. And then we will be conducting this year virtual interviews. Typically, we do have in-person interviews, but because we want to be sensitive to the constraints around the coronavirus, we will be doing virtual interviews this year. The interviewers are none other than me and Jake, who you've just had a chance to hear from. So one of our goals in these interviews is really to be in conversation, to get to know you. Hopefully it's not a scary experience, but rather a really enjoyable and fun conversation with us, so that we can better build a group and a cohort. And that will take place in late January through early Feb, and then we will be notifying fellows at the beginning of March of 2021. Okay, so that's the timeline. And just to say a little bit more about some tips about the process, there's some questions on the application that we really ask you to think carefully about how you want to share about yourself. We really encourage you to find a way to respond to the different questions on the application with a space to really give us a sense of different things that animate you, what you care about, how you spend your time, and how you've grown and how your thinking has grown over time. That's some of what I would encourage you to think about as you prepare the application questions. And I know it says essays, which sounds very intense, but it's relatively short questions, and we do encourage you to take the time to just use this as a space to find your voice. Often fellows do tell us, and applicants do tell us, that they use these essays afterwards for college applications, or at least as a basis of sort of starting their college applications. I see Daniel smiling. See, it's not all bad, this process. Recommendations, we do ask for 2 recommendations, one of which does need to be from a teacher who knows you in a classroom setting, and the other can either be from a teacher or another adult who you've worked with, or who knows you well, perhaps through extracurriculars. The main thing I want to encourage you to do when it comes to your recommendations is, first and foremost, to identify an adult who really knows you well, and can share specific stories about what makes you you and why they believe in you. And I always encourage you to have a conversation with that person to help jog their memory, to help them think about the specific details that will help you stand out. There is a very short video, impromptu video question, and we do not want any kind of fancy editing for that. What we're looking for is to really just get a little taste of you and how you engage and your energy. So that's what the videos are about. And I just wanted to mention a few more things about the ways that we understand how COVID has impacted students right now. We know that probably the majority of you have had to move on to online classes, at least in the spring, and in many cases also now. We know that some schools have not been able to offer the same course offerings that they would typically, that many schools did not do grading in the same way this past year. And that also many activities that you have typically been part of, whether it's jobs or volunteering or clubs, are not able to proceed in the same way. We are taking all of that into account on the application where it asks, for example, about your activities and how you spend your time. You are very welcome to reference and describe things that were a big part of your life that perhaps because of COVID are not possible right this minute in the same way. We are still interested in that. And in general, I just want to emphasize that though this is a very selective program, the transcript is the least significant part of your application, and that has always been true for us in our review process. So again, that's not where we're going to spend our time and focus. We're really going to be looking at your words in your essays, your words in your video, and the recommendations. That's really where it matters most. And of course, if you do have technical questions of any sort, our team is available. There's contact details on our website, and we're very happy to support you to make sure that the process is smooth. Okay, so with that, we now want to really open it up for whatever questions you might have. Panina, I don't know if anyone sent you a question in advance.
No, but people are welcome to send me things now.
You're also welcome to put the question directly in the chat. We're giving you many options here, or you can raise your hand using the system, or even unmute yourself if you want to give it a try. It's all good. I do see if, okay. I'm glad we've covered so much of what you were interested in hearing about, but please do feel free. I see Leah raised her hand, so feel free to unmute, Leah. Thank you. Thank you for going first.
No problem. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the summer process and what that would be like if we were in person.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you just to follow up in the sense of like, what does a typical summer experience look like?
Yes. So like, how would we be engaging with each other? Where would we all be? What would the dynamic look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, in relation specifically to 2021, our aim would be to be in person and to be at a location either domestically or in Israel, where we would really be safe as a group, where everyone would be tested and everyone would be clear that they then could engage in a comfortable way, once it's safe without masks, really in community. It would very likely mean that it would be a kind of closed experience, maybe different than other years where we would be typically maybe moving about a lot more. But that's just kind of like on the COVID side of it, but actually, Jake or Molly, if there's anything that you think might be helpful to say, just kind of about like how does a day feel on the fellowship, or what is some of the kind of essence of what it means to be together? I think that might be helpful too.
Sure. Well, I can share how the day feels, from my end, and Molly, you can certainly, or Daniel can pitch in your perspective as well. The day consists of, I guess you could say, a series of encounters and conversations, and with various faculty members or guests. Depending on where we are, of course, we don't know, but if there is flexibility, we would be able to move around and see different spaces or encounter speakers in their milieu or be outside, be outdoors. But it's you know it's at once it's both kind of like a rigorous and also fun kind of rhythm to the day where a lot is happening. And you know, when Molly was talking about like these deep intellectual pleasures, you know, that's what we attempt to facilitate. And of course, for everybody, it's different. So the activities are different, whether you're you know, in the shiur with one of the faculty members, or you're encountering a speaker, or you're somewhere, or you're doing activity in which you don't learn a text, but the group itself becomes a kind of a text that you're exploring and learning and getting a deeper understanding of. Molly, you want to chime in?
Sure. I think the pluralism of the group is also like really evident when you're living together. Like every day we would, someone who was leading, like we had these like, I forget what they were called, but we would have like two little like leaders of the day that would like write the schedule on a whiteboard the night before. And there was always like run/pray or daven in the morning. And like people would get up like before the like required wake up time and go for runs in Jerusalem together, or they would pray together, or they would do both. And I think also, you know, there's like not a tons of downtime, but there's definitely time to like relax, read a book, hang out. We played a lot of like pickup basketball, like that kind of thing. And then there's also this component that's been coined the night fellowship, which is, you know, what the fellows hang out, talk about. Sort of, we would like sit on the picnic tables outside of our building, or, you know, like hang out inside and just like chat, or I don't know, play other cards, like that kind of thing.
Thank you. I got a private question that came through, which is a great question, which is, are there costs associated with the fellowship? And so thank you for asking that question. The fellowship is need blind, and we do not have costs associated with the primary expenses of the fellowship. We do not want cost to be a barrier for anyone, but I will mention that there are some domestic travel expenses that we ask families to incur. However, we have a scholarship, additional scholarships available, which all you have to do is ask. There's no application process, etc. So that for anyone for whom that would constitute an additional barrier, we remove that barrier. But this is a free experience. This is a scholarship opportunity. Okay, I see a few more questions coming in. I'm just going to make sure I got this. Okay, so one of the questions is, what would a virtual day look like? Which is a great question, and I'm going to let Daniel answer that, and then we'll move to the next one that came through privately.
Yeah, okay. So virtual day. So what we did this summer was, there was sort of like these very, very like high intensity, like a week-long thing called like a seminar, and it would have like a theme that all of the activities were sort of based around. But so you get up at around 8 Pacific, I guess that would be 11 Eastern, AM, not PM, thankfully. But yeah, so you get up, you sort of have like a morning sort of like briefing of what's going to go on in the day. You get put in sort of small groups with like 1 or 2 other fellows, and sometimes you're given questions, sometimes you aren't given questions, and you can just talk. It's basically just like a nice time to sort of hang out and, you know, just like try to have like the experience of like the downtime before like the real intensity of the day begins. Then after that, usually you go into sort of like a more structured sort of learning environment. Usually this is like in small groups, because like a group with like 26 people all in like one Zoom room would be a bit difficult to like have everybody's voice be heard. Sometimes because I know that like Zoom is definitely a little bit difficult sometimes to like feel like you want to speak up and stuff like that. So yeah, usually you have like a more rigorous educational backing. Sometimes it's a speaker, sometimes it's a text study, sometimes it's just sort of like a debate or discussion. Oftentimes it's actually like a text study where you were given a text and you have like havruta, which means like friend or study partner in Hebrew. And you sort of analyze this text or group of text with them, and then you all sort of meet back as a large group to discuss at the end. Then usually lunch occurs. There's a nice lengthy break. It's like 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that. So that's what it was for us. And then you have like usually there's a game when we come back from break. And then you have like an evening session, which is also like a text study or a speaker or some sort of more like structured educational opportunity. Each of these like sort of structured learning experiences are like a couple hours each. So it's not too like horrible being on, you don't have to be on Zoom for too long. Yeah, and then you sort of end, you debrief. Oftentimes it's usually, there's the madrahim who are like it's like the camp counselors. I assume that if we were in person, they would be sort of like camp counselors, but on Zoom, they're more sort of just like facilitators and like, honestly, just like fellows. They're like friends. And usually they'll like hang out with us after. Sometimes we'll do an activity. Sometimes we'll like listen to music or sing or stuff like that. And just sort of talk about the day and talk about our plans for the future. And that's sort of what happens in the seminar. But in between the seminars, there's like an inter-seminar experience, which is like it's a much less structured sort of time. It's about a month long. And in this time, there's enough optional stuff that you could have like the level of intensity of like a seminar, but a lot of that optional stuff is actually run by like the fellows. Like if you wanted to do like a open mic or a debate about like social justice or like Jews' roles in like defending people of color or like Jews like status as minority groups, or an Israel debate even, although those can get very fiery. It's like good, and we had plenty of them on our experience. So there's that. There's also lots of art experiences, and some of the faculty also run their own little optional experiences. There are a few sort of mandatory things, like usually there's like one educational experience each day during the inter-seminar experience, but it's much more relaxed. You don't have to go to everything if you don't want to. And also I found in inter-seminar, there was a lot of like, just sort of like fellows like hanging out, like downtime basically, where there was a lot of just sort of like hanging out or like just talking or FaceTiming. Or for me, it was a little bit hard because I'm a little bit geographically isolated here in the Southwest, but a lot of the fellows like in New York, or like, I assume if there were a few more in the Bay Area than there were in my cohort, they would be able to meet up in person, which is very cool. I mean, like safe and masked up and all that stuff, but you know, it's like there's lots of opportunities to meet up. So yeah, sorry, I just talked for a while, but that's what the virtual experience is like. But hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, it'll be not virtual. Hopefully you guys can go do it in person, because yeah.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, and I mean, I hope, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I hope that you can affirm that it's very different than what Zoom School or something that has,
Oh yeah,
kind of
100%.
specific, there isn't lectures, it's very interactive, and that's typically true whether it's virtual or whether it's in person.
Yeah, I wish Bronfman could teach my Zoom School, honestly. Like, I don't think I've ever enjoyed learning as much as, like, even in person, as much as I have on, like, virtual Bronfman. So, you know, if, like, a virtual educational experience is more fun than, like, in-person school, I think that shows that it's pretty special.
Wow. So a few more questions came in, thanks. And some of them came in just to me, so I'm just going to quickly, there's a few that are relatively quick. So one question was about how on our Israel trip, how do we interact with other Israel programs or other teen programs or movement programs like the URJ programs or camp programs. We don't have any formal interactions with those programs. I would say that most years, if fellows are in Israel, there's often just chance and interesting encounters, right? With, your camp friends are on a certain site visit and Bronfman is too, or, there are times where certainly Bronfman fellows do end up connecting or seeing other people. There's not a ton of opportunity. There isn't like a long stretch of free time, but I will say that there are some opportunities for visitors usually. And so people who have friends or relatives who've already been approved for visiting can see those folks during certain free time slots. So that's kind of how that works with other programs. So in relation to doing other programs at the same summer, if the dates were totally different, certainly an applicant could end up finding a way to do that. I think it's often hard because our dates tend to be pretty similar to other programs' dates. So that's in relation to how that kind of coincides. There was also a question to just answer a little bit further of what are we looking for in a candidate, and so it's a great question. What I like to say is that we're looking for people whose eyes light up when they talk about what they're learning, what they're doing in the world, what they care about, who have a real curiosity and enjoy learning, enjoy going into new ideas and being exposed to a community of people who think differently than them, who don't find that scary, but who actually find that as an enriching opportunity. We're looking for people who are mature and know themselves, but also know enough about themselves to know that they still have questions and that they still want to keep exploring and keep revising and thinking about their role in the world. So in a nutshell, that's the two things I will say. Jake, I'd love for you to jump in and maybe add to that.
Well, an alumna who is a friend of mine once described to me her Bronfman experience as the moment when she, as she said, found her people. And what she was referring to is a certain kind of shared, intellectual curiosity, as Becky said, but also maybe, certainly in her case, and in the case of many others, even intellectual hunger. Just really, really enjoying the process of sitting and thinking together across texts, across each other, across difference. And if you take pleasure in that, then that's certainly interesting to us and appealing to us. And I want to also just highlight what Becky touched on, which is responsibility in the world. If you are actively thinking about the world and want to do things and have done things already, you're active in your community in some shape or form, and that means a very diverse kind of number of experiences, then that's really appealing and interesting to us too. When you get to the interview, so much depends on just conversation. Can we have a thoughtful and meaningful and interesting and engaging conversation about ideas? That already is so important and so crucial. We're not looking for some kind of like record of overachievement, those things are not necessarily just so very impressive, but being able to engage deeply and have fun while doing it, that's just fabulous.
Yeah, and really we're looking for a mix of personalities. The trip would be a disaster if there were 26 extroverts, right? So all different kinds of Jake is freaking out when I even say that, but all different kinds of energies and different kinds of personalities, the tie that binds is that hunger to learn and to be in conversation and community, but it looks different for different people. And that's also so important to have a group that really reflects a wide range of personas, personalities, backgrounds. I wanted to kind of combine two questions that I saw come in. So one question, and I'm actually going to hand it to Jake. So one question that came in to me was to ask a little bit more about the topics that we learn, and in particular, is it grounded in Torah or Midrash, interpretive texts? Is it more general discussion and contemplation? Kind of how does that work? And then I'll just bring together with that the question here about homework or other outside responsibilities for the fellows, and if you can kind of speak to those pieces.
Yeah, sure. So I'm very relieved to tell you, no, there is no homework at all, not at all. And all learning happens for learning's sake, again, for the pleasure of it. In this leading up to the summer, we will send you a recommended list of reading, like just awesome books that we select and update. And these are the books that we recommend based on the experience that is coming in the summer that we think might be of use to you. And for the most part, it's optional. Sometimes we ask to read a specific book. Molly's Summer, people read As a Driven Leaf, and many summers people have read that book. And there are great other books, and again, that is optional. Once the program is over, we invite you to participate in a program aspect of the program called Beyond Bronfman. So it is a way for you to take your Bronfman learning and implement it in some way, to continue it, to pick up something that is that was interesting and stimulating to you, that really stayed with you. And it is not homework. It's meant to be, if anything, it's just like perpendicular to homework. It should be a kind of an outlet and a pleasure, something that you find a lot of meaning in. And Molly, if you could maybe after I answered the other question, maybe you could say a few words about your fabulous Beyond Bronfman project. I still remember it was really great, truly great. And in terms of the things that we study, again, there's such a range. Yes, I would say it's Torah writ large. Meaning, yes, it's sacred text. We do read and study certain classic key Talmudic stories. There's like a canon of stories that Bronfman Fellows read, but also there's a whole lot more. We read contemporary poetry. We read texts that are philosophical. We read texts that many people don't encounter until college or graduate school or ever. And it's really special. We have educators who find ways in which we can open these texts up and really dig into them and enjoy them. And as I was saying, the group itself is a kind of a text, and this is the time when we explore who we are as a community, and that generates questions of its own kind, a very different kind, but hopefully these things are interrelated. And during the arts workshops, oftentimes it is a time to maybe use some of the texts that you have learned in other settings, and approach them creatively and interpret them in your own manner, or maybe be exposed to other more creative artistic texts. It really kind of depends on the educator. So I hope this answers the question, but if there's something specific you're interested in, or if you're interested in the boundaries, like what's okay or what passes for a Bronfman text, what doesn't, we can talk about it more. It's an awesome topic to dig into. But I wanted to come back a little bit to Molly's Beyond Bronfman project, because it it grew out of one of the sessions that we had, a session that was not centered actually around the text. But I'll let Molly pick it up.
Sorry, I was muting myself. So yeah, my Beyond Bronfman project was inspired by a it wasn't unplanned, but it had like a session that had come into formation sort of after hearing about fellows' experiences, both like in their applications and just throughout the summer. Sort of towards the end of the summer, we had a very intense discussion about anti-Semitism and different fellows' experiences with that. And so a facet of my Beyond Bronfman project was me and another member of my school newspaper wrote an article about Jewish teenagers' experiences with anti-Semitism in America. So I interviewed 4 Bronfman Fellows, which was like, just like fun FaceTime conversations, and like a couple other people from California. And then like another facet of my project, which was unrelated to that, was like having conversations about like Israel-Palestine with people in my community. Like in particular, one girl at my school who had like been to Palestine the same summer as me, and so we sort of talked about our experiences, like being like on opposite sides of a wall and what that was like. But yeah, the Beyond Bronfman project, like some people did like trying meditation for their project. Some people wrote like creative stories about like their life and their childhood. Like it's a huge range. Like podcasts, like very different stuff.
Thank you. There's one more question that came through, and we want to also really respect and be mindful of your time. So we will be finishing up then. And I guess I just can't hold back from one other thing I want to add, which is, as Jake was talking about those texts, that often includes a text that might be a traditional Torah text in conversation with a punk song or a visual art piece, or it's funny, there's probably not a ton of boundaries around kind of what we believe can be part of this great intergenerational Jewish conversation that is possible through text and creativity that we believe is worthy of your exploration. So the last question that I received was a question about the application itself and just a little bit more about how to choose the 5 activities that you can write about. First of all, you don't have to write about 5. If you feel that you'd rather focus in on less than 5, that's fine. Please don't exceed 5, because it's really helpful for us to see things that rise up and sort of matter most to you. But we're not interested in the number of hours that you're spending on something, but rather the depth with which it matters to you. So in some cases, it might be that it's 20 minutes a week, but it's something that occupies a lot of your thought and energy and interest beyond the direct time that you're spending on it. But if you believe that it's something that you're dedicated to, you care about, please include that. On the other hand, naturally some people, especially sometimes with sports or other things, it's many hours. Jobs could be many hours, and we understand that also might impact and influence the amount of time you have available for other things that you may be wanting to spend time on, but simply cannot. So for each of you, it's going to, of course, be different, but don't shy away from sharing something that is very much informal. If you love making comic books in your spare time, it's never been published, no one's ever seen it, we'll believe you, and we'll be interested to hear about that and why that matters to you. So again, just showing us who you are, what makes you tick, what you care about is really what that question is seeking. And on that note, as we sort of leave off, you will be receiving an email in the next 2 weeks that will also give you some information about some recent alumni who have offered to be resources to interested applicants to answer questions. And certainly, as I said, our team is available to answer questions. Please don't hesitate. It's great for us to hear from you, and we also are very happy and would love to put you in touch with some of these alumni that have offered their time, because we know it can make a real difference to have your questions answered in a personal way. And And with that, just really thank you so much for considering this program. We really believe in it. I hope you get a sense of that. We really love getting to know every applicant that takes the time to present themselves for this opportunity. And we know that, that's a process that when you make that decision to do that, you're putting a lot of care in, and we will put a lot of care into our review process as well, and we can guarantee that to you. So with that, thank you to Molly and to Daniel, to Jake, to Panina for helping us make this evening happen. And thank you again for joining us. Have a good night.